Professional rugby careers will come and go, and then there'll be those that get cut short. Those are the most difficult to accept for a player, as their life after rugby suddenly becomes the life they need to embrace immediately without warning. Thankfully, there are player associations out there to provide their support during these difficult times, and former Leinster and Ireland international Kevin McLaughlin has joined the Rugby Business Network to share his experiences with us. Kevin, thank you for the opportunity to have a chat with you.
Thanks for bringing me on.
It's our pleasure. Well, Kevin, you've had an incredible 10-year career at Leinster in which you got to captain the side for a period, earned over 100 caps, won back-to-back Heineken Cups and 3 Pro 12 titles, to mention some of the highlights. But which are the ones that stand out for you?
Yeah, really good question. I had a long career at Leinster, but I would imagine some people would remember that I had very kind of unusual start to my career. In that I was brought into the senior team. The coaches felt I had talent and thought I was ready to go, but I had a lot of injuries, a lack of confidence, because when I got back from injuries, I got a chance to play, and I felt like there was a lot of pressure, and I didn't always step up to the mark in those particular games. And eventually, when I did make my breakthrough in 2009, it was just right when Leinster were beginning to have a huge upswing and a huge amount of success. From sort of 2005 to 2009, we had really struggled with form, and we had lots and lots of talented players, but weren't necessarily stepping up at the big stage. And we got, you might remember, the press back in those days were naming us as the Leinster Ladyboys, which is not exactly a name that a rugby team wants to be called. And Michael Cheika came in, and he brought a level of toughness to us. And in 2009, in Michael Cheika's second year with the team, we won our first Heineken Cup. I then went on to play regularly for Leinster over the next kind of 4 or 5 years, and a couple of real highlights for me would have been the Heineken Cup win against Ulster in Twickenham in 2012. I felt like I played probably one of my best ever games for Leinster that day. And then the following year, again against Ulster, we enjoyed taking trophies off Ulster. We played them in the RDS in 2013. It was a beautiful sunny day, and we lost the previous 3 Pro 12 finals. So this is a particularly special one to lift that trophy that day. But yeah, lots of highs, lots of great memories, and a tough career like I think the majority of people have in rugby, but I'll hold on to the special memories.
Absolutely, some great memories to look back on. How would you say though your club career compared with your time with Ireland, during which you earned 8 caps? Are there any regrets that you never got more of an opportunity, or perhaps got to experience going to a World Cup?
Yeah, I think everyone would probably, who doesn't fully realise their potential in an international capacity, would have some regrets. I think I was curtailed by injury for sure, but that 2011 World Cup, I felt like I was probably at the peak of my ability and probably playing the best rugby in my career, and I missed out very, very narrowly in terms of going to that World Cup, and that broke my heart at the time. It's one of those things though, it's the decision either goes with or against you, and I felt like I put my best foot forward. I felt like I was playing the best rugby I could. I felt like I was training really well, and the decision just went against me. But in terms of regrets from an international standpoint, that would probably be it. My international career never really took off. It was bitty over a few years. I felt far more comfortable playing for Leinster. I felt like I had more of a leadership role and could add more there. The difficulty with internationals, you're going in, you're trying to learn lots of new plays, you're trying to settle in. And if you're coming in and out of the international setup, it can be very difficult to feel like you're adding real value. I did go on a couple of tours. I went on tour to New Zealand. I went on tour to Canada and America, which I really enjoyed. It was a huge honour putting on the green shirt. But yeah, I feel like I definitely could have added more from an international perspective, particularly if I'd had less injuries. But that's just sport for you.
That's so true. Well, Kevin, it has been 2 years now since you retired from professional rugby, but sadly, it was not on your own terms, as after suffering a concussion, you were told on medical grounds to call it a day. Many rugby players experience career-ending injuries, but mostly due to irreparable damages to certain body parts like knees, shoulders, back, and so on. How frustrating was it for you to accept that your career was over, considering that your body was more or less still in a good condition, but a series of head injuries was the reason it prevented you from going on?
Yeah, good question. To be totally honest with you, the rest of my body was creaking as well.
Okay.
I was close to retirement anyway. You know, I was getting to the stage where I was enjoying my rugby, but feeling quite sore and struggling to train as much as I would have liked. And I was beginning to think about how close or how much time I had left in me, how many games I had left in my body, my hips, my shoulders, etc., my knee. And as soon as the concussion issue arose, I was very lucky to have the best of medical care in Leinster and Ireland, where they sent me to the best neurologist. They got me assessed, and the decision was made that I shouldn't play anymore, take any more contact, which was really hard to take at the time. I think the hardest part of the whole thing was I'd just been made captain of the club, been made captain of Leinster, because a couple of senior guys were away at the World Cup, and Leo Cullen had been made coach, and he'd asked me to step up as captain and kind of support him in any way I could. So I found that really hard to take. I felt a level of guilt where I felt like I'd let my friend down. Leo and myself would go back many years, played together for many years, and I wanted to support him in any way I could, and that was really, really hard to take. But you know, it's a contact sport. I felt like I'd had a good career. I'm very, very lucky to be in Leinster during a really golden era from a trophies perspective, and I had learned so much and enjoyed myself so much. When I got the news, I was upset for sure, but I also had a tinge of excitement about what was next, and beginning to think, you know, there is life after rugby. You know, one of the hard things when I was told I had to retire is I'd always been Kev, the rugby player, and Big Kev, you know. So who was I now? What was I going to do? How was I going to create a new identity for myself? And I wouldn't imagine that's uncommon for professional athletes retiring for something they've been associated with for such a long time.
Absolutely. So what is your opinion on the current laws surrounding head knocks and concussions in rugby today? Do you feel enough is being done on the field, and not just at international and club level, but in schools too?
Yeah, I do. And I think the media have really latched on to this whole idea of concussions and blown it out of proportion to a certain extent. I think players, young kids up to professionals are safer today, a lot safer today than they were even 5 years ago. You know, any suspicion of a concussion now and a player is pulled off the field. When I remember playing, 5-6 years ago, and it was kind of shake it off and play on was the attitude. The fact is they have no objective way to measure concussions today. They're 100% relying on symptoms and players' honesty. I believe that the only way to kind of solve this problem that exists in the game is to create a culture where it's normal for players to be honest about their symptoms. Okay, maybe in a few years' time they will come up with a way to, on the spot, in real time, be able to measure symptoms or measure damage through blood markers or something like that, but we're a long way off that now. So I think, and I've seen it happen in Leinster, I've seen it happen in Ireland, I hope it's happened internationally, is players are beginning to realise that head injuries are proper injuries. They're like hamstring injuries, they're like quad injuries. They have to be taken seriously. The symptoms have to be listened to and have to be expressed to the doctors. And only when the doctors can understand those symptoms can they actually take proper action, because it's an incredibly subjective injury. The symptoms I get from the same head knock will be completely different from the symptoms that you will get. So it doesn't make sense to apply broad stroke rules across large populations of players, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. Very, very interesting topic of discussion that obviously will not die down anytime soon. Well, when you were told by the doctors that it was in your best interests to retire, were you prepared to move on to another career away from rugby at the time? And what sort of support did the Island Rugby Union Players Association provide with your transition?
Because I'd had a really injury-prone career, I was quite focused on preparing myself for life after rugby. So I finished my undergrad when I was about 22. I spent a couple of years just really focusing on rugby, and then when I went back to university, I got a graduate diploma in finance, and I went on and did a master's in financial planning. And I was constantly meeting people and assessing options. And the way I kind of looked at it, from about the age of 25 or 26, I was looking at each season as if it was my last. I'm making that assumption. I was like, right, if I have to retire at the end of this year, what will I do? Where will I work? What will I do? What will I enjoy doing? And that attitude certainly helped. It meant by the time I got to 30, 31, I actually was retiring. It wasn't as scary. I was also very lucky. IRUPA at the time, now Rugby Players Ireland, were investing more and more in resources to guide and help players like myself who were pushing for an understanding of how their skills could be used outside of rugby. And we had a couple of different player reps during my time there would come in, sit down with you, go through your options, make suggestions, make introductions, and got set up with a mentor. Went to a couple of different business network talks, began to build up my network a bit. All these things really helped. They really helped with my confidence. They made me feel like there actually was some skills that I was learning through rugby that could help me. And I've been in a career now for coming on 2 years, and I definitely feel like it was tough. The first 6 months were really, really tough in terms of understanding where I could add value, etc. But I do feel like now some of the skills I learned, like hard work and, getting through the ups and downs and being able to manage things under pressure, etc., that I learned in rugby are applicable in my new career.
Well, speaking of your new career, and you've said you've been there for nearly 2 years now, you are currently the Vice President of Operations at Kitman Labs. Could you tell our listeners what this business does and what are your responsibilities at the company?
Yeah, so I'm head of operations, the kind of VP, Vice President, a very American term. So what Kitman Labs does is we work with professional sports teams to help them minimize injury risk and optimize performance. So we're a sports science company. We help them collect, refine, integrate, centralize and analyze the data that they collect on their athletes, and then get meaning from that data to make really good decisions about how hard they train, when they train, any interventions that need to be made to stop them from getting injured, who's at risk, who isn't at risk, and provide a really nice software platform for them to make those critical decisions based off the data they collect on the athletes. In terms of my role, so I'm head of operations, which is a translation for a little bit of everything. So I'm based in a Dublin office here with 32 people. So I'm involved in a management role there of managing the day-to-day operations of the office, but also in a business development role and using some of my contacts in professional sport and my understanding of what a professional sporting environment is to sell the product and build out relationships. And we've now got a global presence. We're working with 70 teams across 5 continents, across 25 leagues. So huge growth over the past 2 or 3 years in particular. And it's an exciting thing to be part of. I think my background's in finance, which has nothing to do with working in a startup software company. But for me, this was exciting. It was involved in sport and a little bit different, so it was an easy choice for me.
And it sounds absolutely amazing. And data analysis in sports is always a fascinating subject, I find. Could you mention a story of a sports team or two that approached Kitman Labs and through the company's sports science expertise, what sort of changes on the field did that team experience as a result?
Yeah, so there's a team, we just released a press release of some changes that were made by the Houston Dynamo. They're an MLS football team in the US, and they basically, what they do is they tailor each player's workload program based off what used to be their gut or what they thought the player needed. Then they started using Kitman, and now they had some data, objective data, to back their gut decisions and be able to manage workloads week to week. And based off that, they reduced injury rates, soft tissue injury rates, 70% year on year. They had a much better performance in the league. And, it was real good outcome from using our system. The British and Irish Lions used our system in the summer in the tour to New Zealand and had the lowest injury rate of the entire professional era, which obviously we're not taking all the credit for. They have an amazing backroom staff. But again, having that objective data to back up their gut day-to-day decisions, I think has been really meaningful and really useful for them.
Absolutely incredible. Well, Kevin, for you personally, how difficult was it for you to go from running around the rugby field to working a 9-to-5 job in an office? Was there any sort of assistance or advice that perhaps you received to cope with this massive change in your life?
Not really, to be honest. Like, the advice I got is you just have to find your way of doing it. I threw myself into it. I stepped on lots of toes in the office. I started trying things. I got lots of things wrong. I made loads of mistakes. I asked lots of questions. And I just feel by throwing myself into it and getting stuck in and trying things, I found myself bit by bit learning and adapting to the role. Like I said, it was probably 6 months before I felt like I was adding real value. I think for rugby players who have been in a rugby career for a long time, it probably takes a little bit longer for them to settle into a career like this and into an office job. But I'm very lucky in that because it's a small company, there's lots of different things happening all the time. I'm traveling around, I'm meeting teams, I'm not in the office all day. I'm it's not a job where I'm stuck glued to the desk and glued to my laptop all day. So a lot of variation, a lot of different things happening, and lots of things to learn from. So I'm very lucky in that respect.
Good to know. Well, on the company's website, www.kitmanlabs.com, it says one of the core values is the concept of one team. What are the similarities that exist between Kitman Labs and rugby?
During rugby, like, the team was everything, and in Leinster we always felt that we were going to be playing against teams that had far bigger budgets, better players, better resources, better gyms, better equipment than we did. But one of the things that we could always have an edge over other teams on was our culture and what it meant to be part of Leinster. The majority of people who played for the team were from Leinster and from Dublin and from the surrounding counties. And we made it a special place to be. And, you know, being part of a really strong team was something that meant a lot to me. Our founder, Stephen Smith, the Kitman Labs founder, also worked in Leinster throughout that kind of golden era. So he had a really strong understanding of that as well. And one of the things we push hard within the Kitman Labs office is that we only hire team players, people who want to be part of a strong team, people who want to put the company first and work for each other and build something special together. And that is, you know, the type of environment that we're trying to create here, and also trying to provide for the teams we work with. We want to be the team behind their team to provide that data, to provide that expertise they need, and to provide the software they need to be able to make those decisions to help push their teams forward as well.
And any of those that go to the website and will just see some of those articles that you have posted of the teams that you've assisted will agree with what you've just said there. Moving away from Kitman Labs, you are the non-executive director of ARC Cancer Support. Why did you decide to get involved with this charity?
2011, 2012. One of the initiatives Rugby Players Ireland were pushing through the players is to get involved with a charity and use your profile. I had some profile at the time because Leinster were going well and I was playing a bit for Ireland. Use your profile to support a charity. And I had a friend of mine, Shane Jennings, someone close to him, had used ARC Cancer Support and found them an amazing charity. So what they do is for cancer sufferers and their loved ones, they provide free counselling, free relaxation classes. They bring them in, they look after them, they give them somewhere to go where they can be relaxed and talk about how they're feeling, etc., day to day, which is an amazing thing and something that I was really proud to be a part of. So I got involved just in a promotional capacity initially, and then I joined the board a year or so later. And I've been involved with them ever since, and they're a really great charity.
That's wonderful. Finally, Kevin, what advice would you offer to professional rugby players when it comes to looking at a career in business once they retire, whether or not it is on their own terms?
Yeah, so the first thing I'd say is get a mentor as early as you can during your career. Begin bouncing ideas off them. Do some sort of an evening course, even if it's not something you're definitely going to do when you retire. Just keep your brain working. It's pretty important, and it's pretty important to have a distraction outside of rugby, particularly for when it's not going particularly well. Good for your confidence, good for your self-worth to have something to focus on outside of rugby. And then when you retire, reach out to your network, reach out to the Rugby Business Network, reach out to different people you know, and lean on the union. The union are there, they're happy to help you. Rugby Players Ireland are there to guide you, give you advice, set you up with different people and make suggestions. And they've been through it all with lots of different athletes at this point. So use your network, use the union, and I think you'll definitely have a result.
Some solid advice from someone who's been there and done that and has got the T-shirt. Well, Kevin, having a professional rugby career end before it was supposed to by injury is possibly one of the worst experiences a player could imagine. You, however, are a shining example that life does go on after rugby, and the Rugby Business Network thanks you for sharing your stories and experiences with us, and we wish you a successful business career ahead.
Thanks.